And so one of the residential school survivors had said to me that, you know, when you're being told what to do all the time as a child in residential school, when people do that to you in the healthcare system, it's very triggering, and you just walk out and never go back.
Tonight, a research student uses digital storytelling to help healthcare professionals.
Happy to have a breadth and wealth of knowledge shared, both from people who negotiated these agreements to also newly elected officials and others who are engaged in implementation of our agreements.
A look at modern treaties at a forum in Whitehorse.
I can scratch that off my bucket list, so yeah, it was really good.
And the founder of the Sourdough passes on. We take a look back at 40 years at the club. Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Melissa Ridgen. We begin in northwestern Ontario, where the trial of a former Thunder Bay City mayor began today. Keith Hobbs is on trial for extortion, as are his wife Marissa Hobbs and Mary Voss, who were charged in 2017. All three have pleaded not guilty to allegations they were involved in extorting an unnamed victim into buying a house for Mary Voss. There is a publication ban in place protecting many details, including the victim's identity. Hobbs was a former police officer before he was elected as mayor in 2010. The charges against Hobbs came after retired chief of police J.P. Levesque was charged with breach of trust and obstructing justice for telling Hobbs that he was under investigation. Levesque was acquitted on those charges. The trial is expected to last 3 weeks. There are many barriers in healthcare when it comes to working with and for Indigenous people, and one Yellowknife research student is hoping to bridge that gap by using videos of real-life experiences in training professionals. Our reporter Charlotte Morit-Jacobs has that story.
In foster care, my relationship with my Inuit culture was severed.
It's videos like this that may help teach healthcare professionals to acknowledge prejudices in their practice with Indigenous patients. That's the hope of Shelley Weir, a North Slave Métis researcher who's been diligently listening and recording stories of women receiving subpar health care.
And it's really challenging for them to go into a colonial space and challenge someone in a position of authority. So how can we do this where it's building relationships and it's not confrontational, but it's still them advocating for themselves?
Weir is Métis from Yellowknife, and she's a student at the University of Athabasca, creating digital health stories of Indigenous women sharing their unique lived experiences.
It's not actually being in partnership with healthcare providers, it's being told what to do. And so one of the residential school survivors had said to me that, you know, when you're being told what to do all the time as a child in residential school, when people do that to you in the healthcare system, it's very triggering, and you just walk out and never go back.
I tell my daughters to bring someone with them to the doctor's appointment to be a witness in case they are mistreated.
She says the stories are a form of advocacy without confrontation.
One of the most important lessons out of all the digital storytelling is Maxine telling healthcare providers to have more empathy for Indigenous people. And I think that empathy is a lot different than sympathy, and sympathy is about a colonial relationship and you're feeling sorry for someone.
This week, the digital stories were shared at a territorial government health conference. Tanya Roach participated in both.
The reward would be actually listening out loud to the story that's going on inside your head. It was validating to hear my own thoughts and to even understand what I was thinking.
It was Roach's first time recording her story on tape. She says she's faced many challenges, not being taken seriously when she sought medical attention for her son.
There's a lot of failure in judging people before you even know them. I think the skills that doctors have are important and necessary, but the layer of judgment is there, and it's a barrier to better communication.
In her digital story, Roach shares her experiences in foster care, the legacy of residential school in her family, and her healing journey.
I feel motivated and inspired because a lot of healthcare professionals are asking the right questions by asking things like, well, how do we integrate a more mindful approach with Indigenous people in the healthcare field?
Weir is currently planning a Women in Research Health Conference June 2020 to build upon her digital story work. Charlotte Mort-Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
Elected First Nations leaders from across Canada were in Whitehorse for the Modern Treaties Forum hosted by the Assembly of First Nations Yukon region. It was the first time a gathering like this has happened in the Yukon. The forum was expected to allow First Nations leaders to discuss how to advance treaty rights more effectively. APTN's Chris McIntyre has more.
We're all showing up for each other to be supportive, but we're also showing up to share and to listen and to learn.
Held at the Kwanlin Dun Cultural Center, organizers say the Modern Treaties Forum was an opportunity to bring modern treaty nations together. Modern treaties, or comprehensive land claims, are nation-to-nation relationships between Indigenous peoples, the federal and provincial crown, and in some cases a territory. Comprehensive claims are based on the traditional use and occupancy of land by Indigenous peoples who did not sign treaties. AFN Yukon Regional Chief Kluwani Adamek says this forum is all about sharing knowledge.
It really is about sharing our story, right? Understanding the issues, where did we come from, how did we get here, and then where are we going? So really happy to have a breadth and wealth of knowledge shared, both from people who negotiated these agreements to also newly elected officials and others who are engaged in implementation of our agreements.
Panel discussions covered milestones to achieve modern treaties such as self-governance and land ownership, making new treaties work, and how they affect future generations.
I was a young chief. I sat with
Matthew Kuncum had a lot to say about that. He is one of the architects of the James Bay Agreement, what he calls a modern-day treaty.
You young people, as I sit here, I think about past leaders and what they have accomplished. But I can stand here and say that the greatest story has not been told yet. That the greatest song has not been sung yet. And the greatest film has not been made yet. You determine your future.
The Northwest Territories and the Yukon were under the same AFN banner until they split into two different representatives. The national chief of the Dene Nation, Norman Yakalea, came to the forum to renew the relationship between both territories.
The federal government diverts a lot of the funding to the territorial government, and the money really doesn't get down to the smaller communities. And if it does, it's a small amount. So we're trying to rearrange those type of discussions so that the communities would have direct benefits from the federal government transfers.
Chris McIntyre, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
We've got to take a quick break, but there's still more news ahead. And first, here's a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. To the east coast, we've got 2 and snow in Fredericton, 10 and rain in Halifax. Inukjuak snowy and -4, mostly sunny in La Grande River, -5 degrees. 0 in Val-d'Or, mix of sun and cloud, -3 in Chibougamau. London is rain and 4 degrees. Ottawa, sunshine and 1. Kapuskasing, snow and 1 degree, snow and -1 in Big Trout Lake. -5 for Thompson and snow, -3 and snow in the Paw. +3 in Gimli and Winnipeg, but snow, mix of sun and cloud and 3 degrees in Brandon. 2 mix of sun and cloud in Yorkton and Saskatoon, 0. -8 sunshine for Buffalo Narrows, -7 and sunny in Uranium City. Welcome back. He was Bolivia's first Indigenous president and until last weekend, Latin America's longest sitting national leader. But on November 10th, Evo Morales resigned under pressure from the Bolivian military. Critics call it a coup, but others counter with accusations of electoral fraud. Meanwhile, fearing for his safety, Morales is now in Mexico. APTN's Rick Harp recently spoke with Carleton University political scientist Cristina Rojas to hear her perspective on the current upheaval in Bolivia and Morales' legacy.
Professor Rojas, thank you for joining us. There are a lot of allegations flying around concerning Bolivia at the moment. Some claim election fraud. Others label the situation an outright coup, suggesting the fingerprints of the United States are all over this. How do you understand what's currently transpiring in Bolivia?
Yeah, as you said, it's a little bit confusing, but there are things that are clear. First, there were allegations of fraud in the elections, and the president agreed that the OAS will do a mission and there will be a recount of the process and the votes. And the result was very clear that there was fraud, that the election should be happen again, that you cannot be confident in the results. But of course, that created a lot of unrest in the population. There were a lot of people that were not happy, and some of them were asking for the resignation of President Morales. And finally, he announced that he was going to resign. I haven't seen in the media or anybody that will say that there has been interference from the United States. I think it was an agreement to look at the elections, and the results were clear.
Well, I mean, some point to the role of the Organization of American States, the OAS, which has been, commenting and passing judgment on the election, and some say that's dominated by the United States. So, how do we parse that? How do we understand that?
Yeah, I know that there has been some questioning, but in this case, even the Secretary General of the OAS was in Bolivia a few months ago, and they were with Evo, and it seemed that there were a good relationship between them, and he was very confident that they were going to write a report, and they lay the rules of the game, and I think that's what the OAS report about. So, and not only the OAS, but there were also some reports of independent scholars doing some counting of the votes and comparing the acts, and it was very clear that there was fraud. I think that very few people will say that there was no fraud.
So let's talk a little bit more about the legacy of Evo Morales, and how do you feel his departure will impact indigenous peoples in that country?
It will be hard for different groups of indigenous and non-indigenous. We will know that in Bolivia there were important changes in the constitutions, and these changes were led by social mobilizations of indigenous in the Altiplano, the highlands and lowlands of Bolivia. And Evo Morales, is at the beginning of the program, especially of his presidency almost 12 years ago, implement some of these changes. And definitely, if you look at Bolivia today, it was a different Bolivia of 15 years ago. It doesn't mean that there were no people, indigenous and non-indigenous, that were also unhappy with some things that were happening. One of them has to do with his approach toward nature, his approach toward the environment. They feel that one was his speech, and something different was what it was happening in Bolivia. And there several protests led by indigenous people. This is the case of the Tignis area, and also people were not happy with the politics of land assessment, and especially that was very obvious with the fires that took place recently in Bolivia. So there was a lot of discontent between indigenous peoples too.
Professor Rojas, thank you.
Okay.
In recent days, tensions have only grown in Bolivia, with largely indigenous Morales supporters continuing their protests in the street, calling for the leader's return from exile. Anti-Morales protests also continue in the streets. The political unrest has left a reported 24 people dead. Media reports over the weekend described security forces opening fire on indigenous protesters. On Monday, Green Party of Canada interim leader Joanne Roberts condemned the arrests, detentions and deaths in Bolivia and said that Canada, quote, must use every diplomatic lever to ensure that the interim government eases its abuse of power and calls new elections as quickly as possible. Well, we need to take another break, but when we come back, the death of the man behind the sourdough cocktail in Dawson City and what he's left behind to ensure the macabre tradition continues. And here's the rest of tomorrow's weather. To northern Alberta, we've got -13 in snow in Fort Chip, mix of sun and cloud, and -9 in Fort McMurray. 1 in snow in Edmonton, 9 and snow in Calgary. 10 in sunshine for Campbell River and Tofino, 3 in Quesnel. -1 in sunny in Dease Lake, +1 in sunshine in Prince George. -7 in sunshine in Watson Lake, -7 in snowy in Mayo. -12 in snow for Norman Wells, -23 for Yellowknife and Wattie, but mostly sunny. Polytech, sunny, -22 degrees. Sax Harbor, -18 in sunshine. -21 in snow in Baker Lake, -10s for Chesterfield and Whale Cove, snow there. -21 for Arctic Bay, Resolute, Clyde River, and Igloolik, but mostly sunny skies at -13 and clear in Iqaluit. Welcome back. The man who brought some amount of tourism fame and fortune to Dawson City, Yukon, long after the gold rush was over, has passed on. Dick Stevenson, Captain Dick to his friends, tended bar in a local saloon for decades. He died at age 89 last week, but he started a tradition 46 years ago after finding a pickled toe in a jar after moving into a cabin. The tradition, drink a shot of whiskey with the toe in it and have your lips touch the toe. Here's a story from our own Luke Smith. He filed it a few years back.
It's a busy night at the Downtown Hotel in Dawson City.
You may drink it fast, you may drink it slow, but your lips have to touch that ugly, gnarly, nasty toe.
The hotel saloon is home to the legendary sourdough cocktail, a shot of booze and a mummified human toe. It's a 40-year tradition that has seen over 60,000 people join the Sourdough Club.
I can scratch that off my bucket list, so yeah, it was really good.
Well, it's an interesting thing to do. I mean, not too many people suck on severed body parts, right? So
bartenders usually serve the toe with a shot of Yukon Jack whiskey or another drink of choice.
We're averaging 40, 50 toes a night.
It must touch the drinker's lip, and it isn't meant for consumption. There was a $500 fine for the toe if it was swallowed.
Beyond the lips, if it's chewed or swallowed, it's a $500 fine.
So now the fine has jumped to $2,500 after Josh from New Orleans swallowed the toe last month, seen here on this smartphone video.
It was sitting right there when he did it, and I mean, it was a surprise when he swallowed it to begin with, right? Nobody was really expecting it. The next day, Australian radio called, and Swiss radio called, and German newscast called, and so for about a week straight, it was, yeah, pretty busy. Yeah.
Now the hotel is looking for someone to put their best, well, maybe not the whole foot, but they want someone to step up and donate a toe.
We have a joke ad up on the website advertising for new toes, and we've got a lot of crazy responses, but we're not actively soliciting people either will them or they have an accident and send it in because they're familiar with the contest. So it happens naturally we get them, but but that ad has just went viral all over the media.
The hotel, along with Yukon Travel, has also launched a Facebook contest worth $5,000.
What you do is take a picture of your toe, enter it in our Facebook contest under Travel Yukon on Facebook, and you can win a trip from anywhere Canada flies in the world, and to be brought up to the Yukon for 5 nights and experience the Yukon and the sourdough.
There's no doubt the swallowing of the toe has become a new Yukon legend, making international headlines. Was it planned?
I wish I was that smart at marketing to have planned this. Like, if we could have thought of anything to go viral, we would have done it long ago.
The lone toe, resting on a pile of margarita salt, can only handle so many shots before it starts to deteriorate.
You can donate your toe, you know, like you donate your body parts to science. You can donate them to the downtown hotel if and when you croak, you know, but or pass on, I should say. But yeah, I'm sure we'll get an influx of toes.
And as tonight's lineup continues to grow, there is no question that people come from far and wide to kiss the gnarly toe and forever be immortalized in the Sour Toe Club. Luke Smith, APTN National News, Dawson City.
Since we originally aired that story, more toes were donated, and the number of people taking the Sour Toe Challenge has swelled past 93,000. I myself am a member of the Sour Toe Cocktail, twice actually, proving that whiskey isn't always a good idea. The tradition will continue. Captain Dick put in his will that his 2 big toes will be donated to the cause. Maybe I will too. To Saskatchewan now. For most of us, being behind the 8 ball describes a difficult situation, but for Haydar Ali Capo, being behind any billiard ball is a recipe for success. The teenager from the Muscopheating Saulteaux Nation is the top junior 9-ball player in Canada, and he's now heading to Cyprus for the World Championships on November 18th. Creason Ajakuti reports.
With his eye on the prize, 16-year-old Haydar Ali Capo from Muscopheating First Nation perfects his skills daily, training every chance he gets between school, baseball, and boxing.
I usually do about 5 or 6 minutes of breaking, and then like just breaking the balls with the break cue, and then I do about 5 minutes of just hitting the balls real thin.
3 years ago, Capo decided to pick up the pool cue while watching his dad play. From that day, he was hooked.
When I was about 15, I was shooting pretty good and strong.
Him and I had an agreement early on that so long as he stayed away from drugs and alcohol, I would do whatever I could to support him.
Last year, Capo placed second in the Junior World 9-Ball Championship in Ontario, a title he hopes to win this year in Nicosia, Cyprus.
I'm a little nervous, but I think I should do good up there. I've been practicing a lot.
For months, Capo's family have been fundraising for the money needed to send Haydar and his family to Cyprus. With the help of the local communities, the FSIN, and even his high school in Pasqua, the family managed to raise more than $7,000.
We've had a couple fundraisers, such as a bingo at the band hall, and we've also done a luncheon. There's definitely some excitement. I think everybody's in the same mindset that, wow, we have a potential world champion amongst us.
There's no way we could have a chance at doing this if it wasn't for the people's support.
From here, Haydar Ali and his mom and dad will fly out to Europe on Monday, and everyone here will be rooting for him, no matter the outcome. Creason Ajakuti, CTV News, Pasqua First Nation.
Haydar is actually heading to Cyprus today. The tournament will take about a week, and we'll, of course, check back to see how he did. Well, that's your news for this Monday. Be sure to get the app on your phone. That's the APTN News app. You can stay up to date on all Indigenous news. I'm Melissa Ridgen, and I'll see you back here tomorrow. Have a great night.